Ladies, gentlemen, unicorns, and other blockchain enthusiasts, welcome to the 5th edition of the Stakin podcast. My name is Giselle, and today we're sitting down with Lars Christensen, CEO and founder of Concordium, the blockchain for business. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you so much for joining. Welcome. If you like, let's start with a short introduction about yourself and how you started Concordium.
My name is Lars Christensen, and I've actually spent most of my life in the legacy financial sector. I started a company called Saxo Bank, which is a trading platform and was an early internet adopter. So I saw that revolution when it happened, and built that together with my partner up to one of the biggest foreign exchange trading platforms in the world. And maybe because of that, I became aware of Bitcoin quite early, because it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff we were doing with fiat currencies. So I've actually been following the space since 2012, 2013, something like that.
Right.
And in 2017, when I had stepped down from the bank, I wouldn't say retired, but I wanted to do something else. I decided to also start a foundational blockchain project, which is what is Concordium today, and that's how I got there. I'm chairman of the Concordium Foundation, which is sort of the overall control of the Concordium blockchain project as we're building it.
Awesome. And how have you been feeling about the blockchain space?
Well, I was initially, as I said, quite an early adopter there as well. I was quite the ambassador for Bitcoin in the early days, and I got to meet the Ethereum team sometime before they launched, and I was quite enthusiastic around it. Then I became more skeptical, because I feel there are a number of issues with early generations, that I feel needed to be addressed in order to gain mainstream adoption, and that's actually the reason I started Concordium. And in recent times, obviously because of the project itself, but also because people are getting more realistic about the surrounding world and regulation coming up, I'm now very enthusiastic about it again. I think it'll be later generations of blockchain that really will be relevant for the longer term, but I think blockchain in general reminds me a lot of what I saw in the early days of the internet, and technology with a real transformative potential that can produce much more efficiency in many existing business models, but also be the base of creating entirely new ones, much as we saw the internet in the late 90s.
Right. Well, to be honest, I would not be able to tell you about that, because I was born in the late 90s, so no internet for me back then yet, but it's very cool.
I think it's relevant if you had the chance to live through it. I would gladly swap with you and also be born in the 90s, but I happen to be born a little bit before. So I think it's a very relevant experience, because there's very many parallels between the early days of skepticism with the internet. There was actually a time when most people didn't think that the internet was really going to work, and it was never going to create critical mass, and they were kind of wrong. And I think we're seeing some of the same skepticism and concerns around blockchain, and same thing here. You will see a slow and then increasingly rapid adoption, but we need to fix some things in the space in order to gain real mainstream adoption.
Yes, definitely. Amazing. So, let's just move on to Concordium. What makes Concordium unique, and what is it all about?
Well, the issues that I did see with early generations, and for that matter, some of the later generations, are multiple. There's the whole anonymity aspect, which was was where the space was born. I understand that some people like that idea, but it has absolutely no possibility of real mainstream adoption, because a financial institution or even a bigger corporate could never accept a system that is partially anonymous. So that's perhaps the biggest important thing around Concordium, that we dealt with that through introducing an ID layer, not as a sort of layer 2 use case or an afterthought, but at the layer 1 entry point, which I think is essential for mainstream adoption. Many corporates and financial institutions will not be able to operate if half the network or the entire network supports anonymity. And a lot of scalability issues. I believe we've solved those. increasingly the whole ESG area, the energy consumption is becoming a problem that clashes a lot with a modern corporate or business narrative. And there's a whole lot of range of things that I thought needed to be fixed. Also, the odd thing that on some of these early chains, you have two anonymous counterparties transaction in full transparency, so everybody can see what they're doing. That's
Right.
about the opposite of what you want in the real world. You want people that are under certain stringent conditions identifiable, but have the right to do certain of their transactions in privacy should they so choose. So it's a lot of things to fix. I believe we have fixed many of them in Concordium, and I believe that that was a reason to do the project, because when I went that route in 2017, there was already 2,000 blockchains, so I do number 2001. But I would say the grand idea was to take all of the great things in a distributed permissionless blockchain and combine that with what is necessary to gain acceptance and mainstream adoption. And I believe we've done that, building on some rock solid cryptography and science, building tech in a slightly more corporate way, with more process, more documentation, formal verification of the contracts, and finally, there's some business people involved that have deep experience from working with let's say the old world, but at the end of the day, the old world is still who we need to also accept this space and probably presents the biggest potential for growth. So I believe these things are necessary to address, and I believe that we have in fact addressed them in Concordium.
Definitely, and it's pretty cool to see from my perspective, actually, that you're kind of going against the early blockchain principles, but still making it possible for everyone to be a part of Concordium, whether you're just a retail staker or an actual business. So I think that's a really cool part of Concordium, actually.
Yeah, I think also this whole mining versus staking and PO, proof of work versus proof of stake. I think there's a lot of arguments for proof of stake, including, very important, the sort of the democratic nature of it, that everybody can participate in the rewards. Where proof of work blockchains tend to create great concentration around people with the cheapest energy or the cheapest access to large computer pools, apart from, of course, meaning that they're not as decentralized as they set out to be. They are actually controlled by very few parties, which I think is an underestimated problem in a distributed blockchain.
Definitely, and reoccurring in many blockchains, so it's good to tackle. So when I was doing the research for this podcast, I noticed that you have a very impressive list of activities going on this quarter, actually. You're currently working on the Concordium wallet, integrations with centralized and decentralized exchanges, getting smart contracts ready. So can you tell us which aspects are you most excited about for this quarter of all those amazing things?
We spent now nearly 4 years building this technical platform, which because it's a totally different kettle of fish to build a layer one blockchain than to build a use case on top. This is kind of to use the same parallel. This is the internet. Building the app on top of the internet is a lot easier than building the internet itself, right? And here we have the same situation. So we spent the better part of 4 years building Concordium, and now, in my view, it's all about adoption and getting people to actually use this platform. We know that it's good. We know that it has a differentiated approach to most other blockchains out there, but we need to get people to see that, and that, of course, includes various ways of making it easy to integrate to the blockchain, and that means a lot of obviously building a lot of accessories and SDKs around the blockchain itself, wallets, exchange integrations, etc. So yes, there's a lot of exciting things going on. I wish there was 48 hours in the day, because there's a lot to do, but we have a lot of people internally and externally working on getting us there, and most importantly, I would say we're also seeing very interesting use cases, both big and small, that can see the benefit of this, because I think you need to have both. We're quite happy to support NFT platforms and gamification, etc. But we also want to show that blockchain has real industrial application to big size corporates, where there's a totally different focus on the the quality of the identification of possible identification of users, the compliance with existing and future regulation. I think another underestimated problem is a challenge is that these guys do serious tech due diligence. They actually look, did you build this well? And I don't think so many of other projects out there are fully prepared for what that really means. We're excited about both getting big and small use cases on board, and we need also to be able to efficiently support both types, both the big corporate industrial use case and the small NFT platform or gamification that we also find exciting and actually drives a lot of short-term activity and traffic.
Yeah. So will Concordium become part of the Metaverse as well, or you're more focused on other things?
I see us more as an infrastructure provider.
Yeah.
I think first of all, I think Metaverse is probably a little overblown. It's flavor of the month. It's like it's already there. That's a serious thing to build a really serious Metaverse, and you got some big players in there now trying to position themselves for it. And I think they will build brilliant Metaverses as time goes forward. But I think, again, if you look at some of the big platforms that are now engaging, Meta or Facebook, whatever you want to call it these days, they, for example, have big challenges with identification on their existing platforms. And I see us more as an infrastructure provider to this. We have people building various stuff that can go into the Metaverse on Concordium. But, for example, if you enter into a Metaverse and you're seriously engaging with somebody there, wouldn't you like to be sure that you actually are speaking to the person that you think you're speaking to? I think that's the kind of stuff that our infrastructure would provide. But at the same time, today we have the Copenhagen Fashion Fair, the Copenhagen Fashion Week this week, and we had in the expo there somebody building a use case on Concordium with digital fashion, clothes that you can wear in the space. So we try to both collaborate with people that are gonna build components of the Metaverse, but I think Concordium's role is primarily as an infrastructure provider, because these things need to be built on solid platforms, and that's where we come into the picture.
Well, that's awesome, and actually very refreshing to hear. I think that's something that a lot of blockchains, they want to, but they kind of overlook the serious use cases before the fun. And I think that's very interesting to hear that Concordium is actually focused on that before everything else. So if we look at more of an end user or retail perspective, what will Concordium do for the stakers, and what can they gain?
Well, I think for the users, it's a little bit the same. You will be able to know that you are within an environment where you can identify yourself vis-a-vis the people that you're engaging with, because part of that is also that you get a self-sovereign identity sitting in your wallet, which means that if somebody requests to know your name or your nationality or your age for whatever purpose in a use case, you can of course choose not to give that out. It's your identity, and it belongs to you and not to Facebook or Google. But if you do choose to give it out, the recipient knows with 100% mathematical certainty that you're telling the truth. And I think that's very important. It's not just about catching potential bad guys, but it's about actually satisfying use cases that need certain amounts of information that if you do give it, it's the truth, right? In terms of staking, I think, as I said, I find that method both actually more solid from a technology point of view. It contains a lot less risks than proof of work does. And I think really proof of work concentration risk are grossly underestimated by people. But secondly, also this democratic feature that everybody actually gets their fair part of the rewards, right? Today, when I started out looking at Bitcoin, you could realistically set up a computer and occasionally a Bitcoin would dump your way. I mean, you try to do that today, you're going to have to wait 1 million years before Bitcoin comes your way, right? Because you're up against people that have so much more computer power and cheaper electricity than yourself. Whereas in staking, particularly when we launched the delegation of stake in May, I think is scheduled for, means that anybody that has a stake can actually get their fair share of the rewards and also engage to support the network. So I like staking, and I like to engage with professional organizations like yourself that that actually specialize in this, because we don't want to be any kind of single point of failure or anything. We want to let people make their own decisions on, we want to use this staking company or that staking company, and we will make
Right.
our own choices there. You're not forced to use us or in some way tie yourself further to the Concordium blockchain.
All right. Well, that's that sounds solid to me. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the compliance of the blockchain? Like, how does it work for businesses? And also, why did you feel that this was, the beneficial way to go for in terms of compliance?
Well, I think it's not only the beneficial way to go. I think it's essential, and I think this market needs to understand that a major and even
Yeah.
a smaller serious business cannot operate on the basis of anonymity. You have far too many problems with people appropriating your IPR. You can see lots of fake NFTs floating around the
Right.
system. And you need to know who's engaging with you. If in worst case you have a hack or something, you need to have an idea where that hack value goes, right? And in many respects, for a serious use case that needs some information about you, could just be your age if they're selling you liquor, for that matter. But they need to know that you can supply this information, not
Yeah.
and they need to know that it's true when you supply it, right? So for that kind of user, I think it's essential to have the ID layer. Apart from that, scalability, not
Yeah.
wasting, the energy use of Argentina, which is, just not doesn't fit with the narrative of a modern business, right? But a very much this democratic aspect that you can actually run your own node with a relatively minimal stake, and if you have less than that, or you prefer to just delegate it to a pool, that will be possible very shortly.
Awesome. And so, I have to check my list for a second. Oh yeah. So I noticed that you also have the Concordium free and open grant program. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what you're expecting from this program?
But we have a couple of things where we really want to entice people to use Concordium. We have the
Right.
general grant program, where of course you can apply for any kind of use case. And then we are setting up currently is what we call a Reg DeFi lab, because with my financial background, I can see a lot of potential in the DeFi way of thinking. There's a lot of processes in the legacy financial system that needs fixing, frankly. Just something like finality, which incidentally most blockchains don't have, but you need to have finality for your transactions so that they cannot be rolled back, even if you temporarily gain control of a network. And again, another underestimated problem in early generations, but you could actually roll back quite a long way to some of these systems. That's not good enough for a financial institution. You can't
Yeah.
handle billions of dollars worth of transactions, say with 99.99% certainty. This is not going to go wrong. That's not good enough. You need 100%, right?
Yeah, you're still
And
missing some millions there. Exactly.
well, yeah. I mean, and this is just what we need to get our head around this industry. If you want people like
Hmm.
that, you need also to address their concerns, right? And we do want them. We're not going to kind of just completely obliterate the rest of the world. I mean, we want partners in that world, and we want them to adopt it, because that's where the real scale of this is, right?
Yeah.
So in the Reg DeFi lab, we are in a relatively loose and informal organization. We're trying to collaborate with other people that have the same intention. They see the potential of DeFi. They see how the financial sector can have many of its processes improved, and how even completely new products
Hmm.
could be created. But also, we that understand that the regulator is not just going to say, oh, just because you're DeFi and you're on blockchain, you can do whatever you want. They spent 30, 40 years boxing in the current system. When I was looking at, when I was very, very young, in the 80s, the traditional financial system was largely the Wild West. And look at where you are today, right? And the same thing is going to happen to blockchain. Make no mistake about it. That's just the nature of society, and it will happen. So we need to meet reasonable requests, which is things like you need to, even if you have an open system, you need to, for example, make sure that people pass certain qualifications in order to have a digital certificate, so you can restrict access to certain retail users of certain products that are not deemed suitable for them, or that they are too inexperienced to do. And you can of course do that by doing a layer 2 overbuild, but then you don't really have a distributed blockchain. What's the purpose if you're locking yourself into a little layer 2 KYC case, right?
Right.
So we're trying to solve this at the foundational layer, so that we have both, right? And I think it's important to stress that we're an ID-based blockchain. KYC is a million things, but ID is ID. Either you are Giselle or you're not Giselle. Either I'm Lars or I'm not Lars. But
Yeah.
you might want to be a member of one club, and I want to be a member of another. I want to trade a complex derivative, and you want to do something else. And the KYC for those two things are completely different. So that is an overbuild. But the base of that KYC is always, can I even be sure that I'm speaking to Lars? Can I be
Right.
sure that I'm speaking to Giselle, right? So if you don't know that, KYC becomes kind of meaningless, right? So KYC is something that you build on top, and we're going to bring out products that makes it easier to do AI-based, frames for building KYC. But at the end of the day, the KYC for the local paddle club is going to be different to the guy that wants to trade, soybean futures denominated in Japanese yen on the Saxo Bank platform. That's two different KYCs. But the
Yeah,
idea
whole
is the
different
same,
level.
whether I go to the paddle club or I go trade derivatives, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And so now that we've kind of come to the end of this podcast, I think one really important question remains: what's going to be next for Concordium?
Mainstream adoption, because that is what it's all about. You can have
Yeah.
the best product, and you can fail to market it, and somebody else can win the game. That's seen many times in the history of technology and many other industries, right? So for us now, the focus is of course on continue our very extensive rollout plan for various upgrades, etc., over years to come. And a lot of exciting, groundbreaking new stuff coming there. But it's
Yeah.
also simply to get people to use the thing, right? And for me, that's very much a focus. I'm not a technologist. I'm sort of the commercial guy. So I've been sitting here watching them build this thing for 3 years, and now finally I can actually go out and start contributing. So that's about speaking to big and small use cases all day long, trying to
Yeah.
explain to them why they should choose Concordium due to another thing we haven't discussed, but very low and predictable stable fees, which is of course another problem in some blockchains. So that's what it's really about. And then also making access as easy as possible. We're going to list on the first couple of exchanges inside this month. I'm pretty sure then we have a long rollout of more exchanges. We're going to, as you say, make sure that the wallets are as easy to deal with, make the process smooth in many ways, because that's another thing. When you're at the early stage of the internet, you had to be an internet nerd to deal with it. Today, you don't. You have a shop. You can take a product off the shelf and pay $19 a month, and you have an internet-based shop, right? We're not there in blockchain. We need to make it easier and more understandable to integrate with us, and all these things is not so much about thinking too much about technology. You don't really need to understand how blockchain works. Not that it's very difficult, but you don't need to. Just as you don't need to understand how the internet works. You need to understand what you can use it for. And you need to make it easy to develop those use cases, and you need to make it easy to integrate with the underlying infrastructure, which in essence Concordium is. It's a piece of infrastructure for the next stage of the economic rollout in the world.
Super. So a very well-controlled launch to the moon, I'd say.
That's the idea.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was a
Thank
pleasure to have you. And we'll be looking forward to everything that Concordium is going to do. I know that Stakin is very enthusiastic to be a part of it. So let's do it, I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to have partners like you that can help support our token holders and various people engaged in the system. So thank you to you also.